So today we have the great pleasure of welcoming Yifan Wang for her talk titled Young Adults Language, Meanings and Assumptions about Mental Health. Yifan Wang is a research coordinator with the Dream Big Consortium and a PhD candidate in psychoeducation at the Université de Montréal. Her doctoral work draws on focus group research with young adults to examine how mental health, diagnosis, and well-being are understood in everyday language and experience. We look forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, do I start right now or? Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. Today's presentation, I'm going to share what 22 young adults taught us about how they conceptualize mental health, what are the important factors that plays a role in what means diagnosis for them. It's a participant-led qualitative study, so we involve the youth at every stage of the research.
We need to click once on the screen. And then, okay.
So mental health problems are the leading cause of disability and economic costs in Canada. Most of the problem can start very early in the childhood and peak in the late adolescence or early adulthood. We had the case of research into the pathway to psychopathology, but replicated models are surprisingly hard to find. And the rate of mental health problems among the youth have never gotten down. They've gotten worse actually since the pandemic. So we don't really know what's going on. And what we propose hypothetically is that a possible explanation is that we may not even agree on what we're measuring. So maybe as researchers, clinicians, and youth, they're not even speaking the same language. So maybe when we say mental health, we mean something completely different than what youth means. And there's evidence that this discrepancy exists, and that's a problem because you cannot solve a problem that you can't even measure properly. So how do we define mental health? Well, it depends who you ask. The World Health Organization says it's about coping with stress, realizing your abilities, and contributing to your communities. The medical model says it's the absence of illnesses, while the psychology field focuses on the positive well-being, flourishing, life satisfaction. So it's not being just not sick, it's also about thriving. But when we look at studies with young people, it's a bit different. A Swedish study found that adolescents define mental health as a neutral state, just how you are, not good, not bad, just the way you are. And they say it depends on things like having control, how they perceive themselves, the level of stress, and peer relationship. And when you ask what are the cause of mental health problems, it's mostly the external factors like school workload, relationship with peers and family. So nothing related to neurotransmitters, brain chemistry, or genes. It's just things that are happening around them within their social ecology. So the concept of mental health has expanded so widely, it can cover everything from psychosis to everyday life problems. And there's no consensus between clinicians, researchers, and the youth. So we might be missing key elements in understanding what young people are actually experiencing. Our objectives are pretty straightforward. So we want to know, how do youth age 18 to 24 actually define mental health? And what about mental illnesses? And what factors do they see important to their mental health? And how do they perceive diagnosis? We work, as I said, it's a participant-led study, so we work with the Youth Council from the Center of Excellence in Youth Mental Health at the Douglas. So we need that the Youth Council, they help us define focus group questions and refining the recruitment protocols, also revising the manuscript just to make sure that we're not misinterpreting their voices, and they're also going to help us share the finding back to their communities. Again, the whole idea of involving the youth is just to make sure that we are asking the right questions and interpreting the data through their perspectives. We have recruited 22 participants across 6 focus groups. They have to be aged 18 to 25, live in Montreal, speaking French or English. We originally wanted equal proportion of female to male, but we ended up with the female overrepresentation, which is kind of very typical of mental health research because having a male speaking for emotions, sensations in psychology, that's kind of a bit difficult and challenging. But even the recruitment itself was really challenging to get the youth. Each focus group session ran 19 to 120 minutes, and we had 2 moderators. We offered both online and in-person session. We originally only wanted in-person session because we feel like the dynamic of an online focus group could be different, but ended up everyone just wanted online sessions, so we had to accommodate their preference. And the interview guide covered 3 main areas: how they conceptualize mental health, what determined their mental health, and how they perceive diagnosis. We also have a section for the pandemic, how their mental health was affected by the pandemic, but because we have a lot of data, so for this presentation, I'm not gonna include a pandemic. And the groups were kind of small, so we have 3 to 5 people per group. The original plan was 8 to 10 people, but because with the recruitment difficulties, we're not able to get more than 5 people per group. But it was actually better because a smaller group felt like more inclusive, so everyone could just talk and have their voices heard. For the analysis, we use a Brown and Clark's thematic analysis. So the 6 step that you see here, I'm not gonna go into the details. We also took a constructivist stance, so means that we're not just pulling out codes at its face value. We attended to both what people said and the meaning that might lie underneath. We had 2 coders, team validation going back and forth. 3 big themes emerged. I'll walk you through. Okay. So the first theme, what is mental health? How do you define mental health? For the young adult, it's an internal day-to-day sense of emotional and psychological well-being. So it's something that you're living in all the time, ranging on a spectrum from feeling of stability or happiness down to state of distress that could interfere with your functioning. There's also resilience. So one participant mentioned mental health, like you can have a sense of well-being and happiness, but it's also like being able to recover from adversity. So it's not just being always happy, but it's the ability to overcome them. It's not like to get dragged down by them. So they're not saying that mentally healthy people don't struggle. You can't be, you don't have to be happy all the time. It's not getting dragged down permanently. So the capacity to feel difficult things and eventually return to some kind of stable baseline. And when we push further on what being mentally healthy looks like in practice, they mentioned, so it's the ability to manage everyday stressors, maintaining a positive peer relationship with the family as well, and engaging in schoolwork, even when things are hard. They also understand that mental health is dynamic. So it's not a thing that you have or you don't have. It's not fixed. It moves, it shifts, it's always being there and also changing. So mental health can go up, can go down. It makes sense. But they took it further. So it can be positive and negative at the same time. Like it can be thriving in some aspect of your life and then struggling with others. So it's also multi-dimensional. So they might be doing great at work, falling apart in relationships. So mental health is not just one thing. It's like a constellation of different domains, and they can be going into different directions, going up and down in different directions for different domains. However, one thing that I find interesting is that culturally in everyday life, how the society talks about it, from what I heard from the conversation, is that mental health, they only become visible when something's wrong. Like mental health is in the background, but nobody notices until it breaks. So one person put this way, most of the time mental health just stays like silently in the corner of people's life, because people can be only like attach importance to it when they find there's a problem with it. So mental health is there, it's invisible. It only step out of the corner when there's a crisis. And one participant kind of summed up this cultural reality, said that like culturally, this is how it's spoken about. Like if someone's happy, no one's like, let's investigate that. So I guess for me specifically, the term mental health is just negative. So it kind of makes sense when I reflected on the conversation that we had. Like no one, like you only notice when things are going wrong. When you're healthy, you don't say to other people, hey, I'm healthy today, I'm functioning well. You only mention things when are not being okay. So the whole discourse gets skewed toward pathology. And these youth, they have a very rich dynamic understanding of what mental health could means, but the word itself kind of saturated with the pathology and basically become like a synonym of mental illnesses. And what about positive mental health? Well, they're lived, they're being experienced, but they're not named. Like there's no names or label for positive mental health. Okay. Okay, so the second theme is what contribute to mental health. What came up often are the relationships, social contexts they navigate every day. So social interaction and relationship came up constantly, almost in every session that we have. So the quality of connections, like feeling being supported, having meaningful relationships, spending quality time with friends, they were described as absolutely central to their mental health. But relationships are not just the protective factors. On the other hand, they could be also risk factors. For instance, there has been a report of feeling left out, feeling disconnected, having conflict. This actively undermine mental health. So the quality of the relationship is very intertwined with their sense of self. And this is particularly important for the youth undergoing through like this emerging adulthood, so the age 18 to 25, 24. So that's a stage where they're in now. So there's a period, it's a period of maintaining the relationship with their friends becomes a labor. Because when you're younger, like friendship just happen. Like you go to classes, you see your friends on the soccer team, like friendship just happen. You don't have to do anything to maintain that friendship. Whereas if you grew up, you graduate, you go to different jobs, and you have to make plans to see your friends. So the connection fade if you don't do so. So that could be exhausting for some participants. And for youth who are already struggling other area of their life, it can feel like impossible. So their social network kind of shrink precisely at the moment when social support matters the most. And next we have benchmarks and social comparison. So our sample was composed of mostly advantaged and educated youth. It was an overrepresentation limitation of the study. So they describe mental health as profoundly shaped by how they evaluate themselves against milestone in expectation. So there's I hear very often a sense of being measured by the society, by the others, or even by themselves against a timeline where they should be, for example, graduate when you're 22, have a job when you're 25, and own your life by 30. And when they feel like they're behind, there's an impact on their mental health. And even when they're making progress, it doesn't feel like enough. So one participant mentioned, so even if you're advancing and like going towards my goal, I don't necessarily feel good about myself. I'm not necessarily like proud of myself. And where do these expectations come from? Well, social media. the distress is not coming from like internal distress, but it's coming from like a social meaning of where they should be relative to where they are. And this brings me to something that is very unique to this generation, the digital life. Smartphone, social media, and online gaming is absolutely pervasive. And when we ask about mental health determinant, screen time came up almost from every session. But here's what's interesting. I didn't have like screen time about narratives. Screen time can be both a source of connection and also a driver of isolation, sleep disruption, and very brutal social comparison. So I have one participant who captured this tension perfectly. They said, I think for some people, screen time can be a very positive source of stress reduction and a very positive interaction with friends. If a young adult is getting social interaction through games with their friends online, then it can be positive for them. But at the same time, it can be isolating as they're physically not with the people. So I think it can go both ways. So yeah, so you can have genuine connection online, but also you're in your room alone. You're not developing face-to-face social skills. And also there's social media, that's a big one. Because social media, they are designed to show you what you're missing and also to show off other people's life. You're like seeing everyone's highlight reels and comparing to yourself, and that makes you feel behind. And of course, that damage their mental health. But at the same time, social media kind of hold their weak ties with other people. So if you leave social media, well, you lose the access to a whole layer of social capital because all their friends live on these platforms. So they're kind of caught. They want to stay connected, but staying constantly online has cost to their mental health as well. And then we have this transition to adulthood. So again, the participant are age 18-25. It's like in between space. You're not quite adolescent anymore, but you're not fully established as an adult. So they describe this rapid shift in responsibility, and for many people, it's the first time in their life they have to think about money as a source of stress. But it's not entirely negative either. It's like there's mention that independence has upsides. You have more freedoms. These young adults, they wanted independence, they crave it. And now they have it, but it comes with cost. You have to pay your rent, your bills, provide yourself food. So they were kind of experiencing the transition to adulthood in this period of growth independence that coexists with some financial stress and loss of family support. Okay. We also had a conversation around mental health illnesses and how diagnosis is perceived. It's pretty much like a double-edged sword. So on the first edge, you have the benefit. Sorry. So first, you have normalizing experiences and access to treatment and support. Several participants describe diagnosis as a moment when their suffering kind of stop because the name can change everything. It shift from like there's something wrong with me as a person to oh there's something wrong with my like I'm sick, something wrong going not okay with my brain, and other people can also relate. And also diagnosis is a gateway to care. So you need a diagnosis to get therapy covered by insurance, to get medication, to get accommodation in school. So diagnosis can be a validation, it is community, is also access to treatment. However, on the other edge, you have the barriers and gatekeeping. So access to diagnosis isn't equal. That's what I hear from the discussion we had. It requires you to navigate a healthcare system that costs money, takes time, and favors some kind of people. So one participant mentioned there's a lot of financial barriers. Having a diagnosis is almost like entitled. Some people be like, I'm more valid than you. I actually have a diagnosis and you don't. So diagnosis can be a marker of privilege. So if you have the money and the resource, you can afford a psychiatrist. If you have educated parent, then you know how to advocate for assessment. While the person struggling the same way, but without those resources, has no diagnosis, then no accommodation. And participants were also critical of the diagnostic process itself. For instance, the DSM, they require you to meet a certain criteria, like a number of symptoms, durations, and level of impairment. And maybe if you're one symptom short, then your pattern doesn't really fit the boxes, so you don't qualify. But the distress, according to the youth, they are real. So you don't. So, but you can access the treatment if you're one symptom short. And the second harm is the stigma and labeling. So even though diagnosis can provide validation, it also marks still. So when you're diagnosed with depression or ADHD, for example, there's a risk that the label becomes all you are in some context. And there's a partial comment about how this play out for women. I have a participant who mentioned, well, if you're a woman, having a mental health diagnosis on your file can be scary because all your actual medical concerns can be reduced to mental health problems. So in a sense, youth reject this box-checking quantitative approach to diagnosis. They find very reductive and invalidating. They know that their lived experience is much more complex than a list of symptoms. But at the same time, I have a multiple youth who mentioned that they needed the diagnosis, like a currency. You needed to unlock accommodation for school, treatment, and validation, particularly accommodation for school. Like if you have a diagnosis, then you have more time to do your exams or assignments. Okay, so few takeaways. We've got a generation that views mental health as a fluid day-to-day balance of resilience, but they also live in a culture that focuses almost exclusively on pathology. We don't really have a vocabulary for anything related to positive mental health or resilience. They attribute the source of their distress within the world around them. So missing life benchmark, financial strain, social media, and comparison trap. They also find themselves in a system that prioritizes medical labels and diagnosis over lived experience. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, for strength and limitation, this is a participant-led design. The youth council involvement kind of reduce the risk of imposing like adult definition on youth experiences. Also, the semi-structured format kind of let new things emerge. Also, we took a constructivist approach. So we attended to both explicit statement and the underlying meanings. Also, the study is subject to limitations. First of all, as I mentioned, we have a gender imbalance. Only five male participants. We may be missing important male perspective on mental health. Also, we have education homogeneity. So 19 out of 22 participants had at least some university education. We originally aimed half advantage and half of the sample should be disadvantaged youth. So youth from at least people who have only finished their secondary school. Yeah, so that's not really representative of all young people. And also this study was conducted in Montreal with a specific sample. So the transferability to other linguistic and cultural community needs more work. Yeah, so future research could examine how these construction vary across different background and more balanced sample. Yeah, just to conclude, a few implications for practice. So, first, intervention should focus not just on symptom reduction, but on promoting resilience and functional recovery, and that kind of align with how young adults themselves define mental health as a capacity to cope with the adversity and maintain a positive relationship, and continue to engage in meaningful life activities despite the stressful life event that could happen during this emerging adulthood. And second, clinicians should prioritize looking beyond the box checking approach to diagnosis and address the societal pressure that are driving the youth mental health crisis. So if this stress is mostly emerging from this external conditions like benchmark financial strains, then purely individual level intervention could be limited in their effectiveness. Okay, and that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Thank you, Yifan, for this excellent presentation.
Thank you.
We have some time for questions.
Yeah.
Maybe to open the
Yeah.
conversation, I'd be curious to ask you, what were your assumptions when you started the project, and how did the young people's responses contrast with what your assumptions were?
Be honest, we didn't have any assumptions because it's a qualitative study and the aim was really to explore how they perceive mental health. So we didn't have any assumptions. What was the second part of the question? How it was not.
Well, perhaps from reading the literature or based on how they thought about mental health, there might have been ways in which
This
people said surprised you or was similar to what you could have expected. How did that go?
Well, because I have a training in psychology and psychoeducation, so the way I was being trained, like mental health problem emerged from like a biopsychosocial, what do you call it? Biopsychosocial aspect of your life, right? So I would expect things like, oh, the genes, like whether your nutrition, genes, sleep, that kind of affect your mental health. But no, it's not. It's just purely your social ecology. That's that matters the most. Like your relationship with your peers, with your family, whether or not you're moving, you're not falling behind, you're having good grades. That was kind of a bit a surprise to me. Yeah. Yes. No.
Wondering if,
Hello. I can't find the hand thingy. Where is that?
for you, if it ever suggest volunteering as part of the process. In other words, going out of their problem a little bit to be involved in a greater cause, in something they feel to help. I know this might be out of what you're dealing with, but
You mean volunteering like as an activity to that kind of have an impact on their mental health?
right, and be involved in greater cause.
So what?
You just repeat the question.
Okay, so the question was whether like they mentioned volunteering. Yeah, actually yes. We have one participant who very briefly, I think, not just volunteering per se, but it just engaging in activity with other people who can relate to, like people who have the same what they call it, hobbies, who can share like a common interest and contribute something towards the society, the community kind of was a positive, something positive for their mental health. But I think only one person had this.
In other words, if it's ever offered to people in that health group situation, that even though we do volunteer for the cause, but there's the boomerang effect that makes people feel good about themselves, that they can make a difference, that they can help, that they can share, and sometimes one good thing leads to another, and that's it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but from what I remember, from what I hear, is mostly it's just being able to be with people who share common interests, who have common goal, and to share that quality moment with their peers that matters the most, rather than like contributing something positive toward the society. And I don't know if that answers your question.
I have a long history of volunteering, and I really see that people come to volunteer for the cause and they end up feeling so much better about themselves and whatever their situation may be after some time.
Yeah, I understand. But it's just not the problem, but it's just the trend that young people, they are on social media, they're online all the time. So maybe for them, volunteer, like getting step out of their room was less a priority.
I have a question.
Yeah, I see a question.
I can't. I was wondering about the question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Did you interview any non-college young adults? And related to that, were there any questions about the cultural and social aspects of their family life? Because that can be also very interesting.
Sorry, I got distracted. Can you repeat your question?
I'm just moving it here.
Okay, just sorry about the technical issues
That's
here.
fine.
I'm gonna stop sharing. Oops, you stopped the share already?
Okay. But I can't hear.
It's fine. Um, okay.
Okay, should work.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. You said about youth who are not college educated.
Right. And the second part was about questions about their family culture and family mores, what was important to them.
Yeah, so for your first part of the question, well, we thought about equal ratio of people who don't have a college education, but it's very difficult to recruit these people because we just don't know where
They're
to
working because they're working from.
Sorry, what?
And many of them will be working.
Yeah, exactly. So we recruited people via like social media, website, college, groups. What works the most was through their college, undergrad groups. That works the most. They can share the poster through their listserv, but otherwise we had a lot of challenges just to make other people share the recruitment and getting people who are less like educated, who didn't have a undergrad degree or at least some college education. And also, I think it's also very common, like when you talk about mental health, like mostly people who are interested towards the topic are people who have at least some college education.
Yeah, but that could be a bias or a conflict.
Yeah, it could be.
Right. Okay. Yeah, challenge. Thank you.
Yeah. Valérie.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I found it very interesting. I was wondering in your literature review if you came across equivalent studies on adults and recognizing, how the adult conceptualization of mental health might differ from the youth conceptualization, and whether it actually coincides with the way we're measuring these things in adults as well. And then the second part of my question was if there is actually a difference between, which I think is what you're implying, there's a difference between how youth conceptualize mental health versus adults. Do you believe, just from your knowledge, that the conceptualization evolves as the youth grow and become adults, or do you think it's a generational difference that they'll maintain with them as they get older?
Okay, for your first part, the literature I had, mostly it's late adolescent, young adult. So we don't have I didn't look for the literature anything related to how, like, you mean older adults, like people who are, or like what age exactly?
I was just thinking about adult populations in general, not a specific age.
I didn't came across anything related to adult population in general, how they conceptualize mental health. My literature focuses mostly on late adolescent and young adult, how they conceptualize mental health. And also feel like for this generation, like it's particular because they are the generation that went through the pandemic, and their definition of mental health could be completely different than what I had back when I was 18 years old. Sorry, what was your second part of the question?
The second part was just wondering if you believe that their conceptualization will evolve and change as they enter adulthood, or if it's something that they're going to carry with them as a generational conception of mental health.
I can't speak for them, but I feel like it could change because the more like this emergent adulthood, so 18 years old to 25, it's like things are changing around you. So your definition of mental health could be really defined, like as I said, like it's really depends on their social ecology. And as you get older, for sure you grew out of it, and there's maybe less, you may be less impacted by, for instance, social comparison. That's my point of view, not validated by the literature.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Very interesting talk. Thank you. So I'm a perfectionism researcher. Just hearing a lot about people not being benchmarks and feeling shame at not meeting expectations, social media, feeling less worthwhile, and is there ever any talk or mentioning into this transfer of perfectionism, feeling that we've been perfect or
Yeah, for sure. We had, I think, more than one. Well, like these youth, they have many things going on in their life. So they have school, they have work. Just perfecting on one is already difficult enough. And some of them, they're balancing between work, assignments, exams, and some are very athletic. And so when you're athletic, you like to compete with other people. So that kind of add another piece of stress to the already overwhelmed competing life.
lately you see any gender differences being roles important? You got oh, sorry, can you just
Okay, so
question, Jeffrey?
yeah, someone asked whether there's a gender difference. I wish we had a lot of more males because we only had 5 males, so it's kind of very difficult for me to mention like if there any obvious trend in gender difference. From the 6 focus groups we had, honestly, I didn't notice any obvious gender difference other than this one person, as I mentioned earlier, that for them, like being a woman and having mental health problems, that's all they become. Other than that, I don't think we had any obvious gender difference because we had, as I said, overrepresentation of females. Yeah, but I think that would be, yeah, that was an interesting objective that we could have. So we didn't have enough males.
Question. Back on and they, this seems the theme of what does the community say? And why do I need to be, and I have to be like them? Like those are two, it's very interesting to think that this isn't about stress of something bad happening in life. this isn't stress, this is about the kind of symptoms of what has that they use as markers, but it's more a measure and of social performance and expectation of similarity. So I'm just wondering how that if there was any reflection in the group, that any of this could actually should be changed, either like spending less time, paying attention to others, or not needing to be like others. Was there any even thought that, because it seems, like some things are really hard to change when it comes to events that lead to mental distress. The events that happened in the past that, that they can't focus, through because they're being very hurtful and their losses, and they're feeling overwhelmed. But this is, in a way, if you imagine, well, I don't need to be like them, and I can have my own path. So that just seems, like even that, the idea that maybe this is a worldview that I need to participate in. I'm just wondering whether there was any thought about that this was something they had power, some power to modify.
Oh, you mean the social comparison and hitting the benchmark?
I think there was anything you felt was in their hands other than just to go and see if there's somebody that they looked like that was, because just out of all the source of mental health was outside of their control. So it's like lots of people perform and succeed, then they don't, then they're not as good.
I think at least they came to this realization that I'm being stressed because I'm falling behind because of the comparison. And they knew that this is something that they have no control over. But at the same time, the comparison also comes mostly from social media. At the same time, they kind of trapped. They don't want to quit social media because that's where all difference lives. But the more you're hooked up to social media, the more you compare yourself to what like other people are living, and that's something that came up very often. Like you're in your bedroom and scrolling the reels, you see that your friends going to vacations, getting a job offer. I don't know. And it's something that's purely out of control. They feel like stressed, like people are moving on, whereas me, I'm so in my bedroom scrolling up the reels. And I get your idea, but because like you're saying as an adult who went through a lot, but for these young adults like who just finished their adolescence, for them it's like the social ecology, that's all they have. Because as I mentioned, like the quality with their peer relationship is really matters the most to them.
And these comparisons on social media function as a kind of compass, right? For young people to get a sense of what it is, what success looks like.
Exactly.
And foreign guys. And so if they try to just stop looking at those contents,
Exactly.
there's no other contents.
Exactly. Like social media is designed to show off. Like you don't see people not living not a good life on social media. You only see people thriving, successful, having their best life on social media.
Yeah, I have a bit of a question. Have you also thought about instead of just looking at social comparison, to look at the social validation that they get from posting? Because I think it can be a bit of a narrow view to just look at people as in they're on social media because they're comparing whatever they want to compare themselves to other people, and that's why they feel bad, right? Because a lot of times the people you follow on socials, it's not just celebrities, and it's your friends, and it's some influencers, and it's stuff that you think is just funny, right?
Yeah.
Or that you like to look at. And I think there could be a large part of them that their depression might come from the fact that they don't have something to share that they would get validation on, or if they do share, they don't get the likes or the views, so they're not as funny. And that's kind of where and I think the comparison would come after them seeking that initial validation for what they like, and not necessarily I like this because another person who's popular likes it, right? So I think that's also something that could be more considered.
Yeah, absolutely. But we didn't go that far because like social comparison, that topic was not even in the interview guide. It just emerged naturally through the discussion, and we had multiple, like we have almost I think every session we discussed that theme emerged. Yeah, but would be interesting to dive deeper into this topic, considering that it's a big one. Okay.
Please join me in thanking Yifan for this presentation.